performance, or experimental plays about us and the people and things around us, or nights out to make a change. When I was 9 years old, I was playing in the front garden of our house in the south inner city of Dublin. It was 1998. I found a syringe and I told my brother to close his eyes and open his hand, and I put the syringe into his hand. There was blood in the barrel. There was uproar. Me and my brother had a huge scrap. I couldn't understand why he was so angry with me. I was only messing. My mother made us draw a picture of the syringe to identify what it was. She didn't know whether it really happened or whether the chaotic media reports were messing with our heads. Every day, people knocked on our door looking to borrow spoons. I once stole the leftover Christmas turkey and fed it to a group of alcoholics who hung out in buggies across the road from our house. Their red faces used to really upset me. I thought, they're really sick and no one's helping them. It was an open house that I grew up in. My parents had done a lot of work on themselves. In that house, I learned how to empathise. I understood what addiction was. I was told that the men at the buggies were sick. They had a disease called alcoholism. My parents marched with their parents, maybe with your parents, on drug dealers' houses, but they stepped back when it got violent. Through a community employment scheme, my mother, who's called Dyas, and he was a person, and he was sitting there. Through a community employment scheme, well, started inspired by community employment scheme, my mother ended up going to this institution and studied for a master's in race and ethnicity. So I spent my childhood playing in this college and on the streets of the inner city. It wasn't all rosy in the garden though. It wouldn't be honest to stand up here in front of you all and believe that's part of the story either. We had our problems in my family and we all suffered great trauma. I was bullied, I drank early, I smoked hash every day of my secondary school education. I was arrested, I was more than 3 hours late every day for school, so much so that our principal introduced a kind of a flexi-time system where I had to stay back later than all the other kids. I just wouldn't get up on time. I passed the leaving cert in the end by the skin of my teeth, and I missed out on the opportunity to go to this college and study drama, which I loved. When I was 16, I joined Dublin Youth Theatre, and I can honestly tell you that that changed my life. I met people there who weren't like me, who came from different backgrounds, and it was the first place where I learned it was okay to be whoever I was. The youth workers and the artists that I met there encouraged me to write. They saw that I was suffering and they encouraged me to tell my own story. I later learned that writing is an act of hope. That's important, the right to tell your story, the right to listen and be heard. I'm 24 years old now, and for the last 5 years I've spent every waking moment of my life following a vocation to change the world through art. We often work in the community. Me and the ensemble of actors and designers collaborate with different groups to write the pieces. That's mostly been in Rialto, Fatima Mansion, and Dolphins Bar, where I grew up. In 2010, we made a piece called Heroin, with great help from my friend Dylan, in collaboration with the Rialto Community Drug Team. We told the story of the social history of the drug from the 1960s up to the present day, and we did that to make the point that no one wakes up one morning and just decides to inject heroin into their arms. We wanted to stage the bigger picture in all its glorious complexity. The effect has been phenomenal for us. 3 years on, and we'll present the 50th performance in Limerick next week. We live in a fragmented society. Drug users are fragmented from the fragments, the disadvantaged among the disadvantaged. I've met hundreds of people who've used heroin. I work a lot with drug addicts. Heroin users, heroin survivors. Notice the difference in the language between those few terms. Notice the term of expression I'm not using. What is it? There's power and politics at play in everything. Language is very important. When I first started making the piece, I asked the people I worked with, if you could change one thing about the rest of the world, how the rest of the world sees you, what would that be? Overwhelmingly, they all said that word. I would never have known that. It's like, what I learned was that word is like the F word for gay people, the D word for gay women, the K word for travellers, the S word that Ross McCarran uses. These are dangerous words. I saw this as an opportunity. Here was the potential for real, tangible change. Most people use that word ignorantly. They use it because they don't know any better. Sure, I used it. I thought maybe that I could use theatre to bridge that gap. I've never once met someone addicted to heroin who hasn't been the victim of sexual abuse. That connection is tangible. Heroin is a painkiller. The two epidemics run side by side, but the even inherent hasn't noticed the connection. There are 20,000 registered addicts in this country and 30 detox beds. Methadone is cheap, detox is expensive. We as a society are letting those people down, just like we let their parents and their grandparents down. A whole generation of children who live in local authority housing are being raised by their grandparents because their parents are dead or in prison, and they will probably never vote. You'll notice I haven't used the term working class yet. I don't think that's a very good term either. But these people are the ones that have never worked so far class. Most recently, we've been working in St. Michael's Estate towards a public art commission. The piece is called History and looks at 90 years of failed housing policy on the land. This is not only the site of the infamous tower blocks, but also where the 1916 revolutionaries were brought, and it was also home to Golden Bridge Industrial School, where Christine Buckley was imprisoned. The people of St. Michael's Estate, not 10 minutes drive from where you're sitting now, were promised regeneration 4 times. 4 separate plans were proffered by the state, and 4 times the residents picked out where their houses would go, what kind of tiles they were going to have, curtains, wallpaper, down to the detail. And 4 times they were let down. Most recently in 2008, when developer McNamara pulled out a public-private partnership. The Irish state would be ready to sell that land to Bernard McNamara. Over 400 houses would become 86, so he could build a little, and so more landlords could benefit from renting houses. But then it went belly up for all of us, really. I've been doing some work in Limerick lately. I've seen the bullet holes in people's houses on the island. I cried last week in the office of the regeneration, I cried in the office of the Women Residence Forum when she told me about the failings of regeneration in my Ross, where you now have people living alone in whole avenues of boarded up houses due to years of feuding and the failing of the Irish state to provide for those people. Over 20 years in this city, and I know there are those here who remember the headlines, we battled a heroin epidemic, brought about by a housing crisis and the abuses of the Catholic Church, who we trusted to care for children who emerged from those institutions so scarred they could never recover. We built an infrastructure of services. We marched for change. We talked about regeneration and progress, and systematically over the last 2 years, the government has been cutting those services. Cathy and Claire asked me here to talk about unsung heroes. If you saw change over the last 20 years in the streets, it was because of the addiction workers, the community development service, the family resource centre, the community employment scheme that Imelda was part of, the youth theatre that I was part of, which are all being ripped apart now by austerity, and that's not in the news. They're getting away with it because in our society, these people don't have the right to tell their story. They are not being heard. How can we justify targeting the most vulnerable in our society in one of the biggest economic disasters of our history? It just makes me go like, are you for real? 11 community addiction workers lost their jobs in the last 5 years in the canal communities, and we are paying off a bank guarantee of millions of a figure which some chap said on tape that he pulled out of his arse. And when they went back to say, how are you putting these community addiction workers, they were just told the money simply isn't there. We are fragmented, we are separated, and that's what I think I'm trying to do. I'm trying to join those spaces together. I'm a messenger. I think if we just do more about each other, I think that things will be better. I'm not an idealist, and I don't have a bleeding heart, and I'm certainly not a Pollyanna, as I was recently called by irate journalists in Limerick. Who could not understand my position on addiction. You're a right little Pollyanna, she said to me and why should I have to walk over these people to get to my car? I pay for that car parking space. I want to bring these stories together. I think that is how we can be part of how this can all change. I'm definitely not a Pollyanna. It's hard right now to be glad about anything, but we keep going. We fight the good fight, and we never quit. I was thinking about being blessed to be asked to be your tour guides in the future. I think in this country we're obsessed with the past and the future, often because the present moment is unbearable. It is existentially impossible to quantify, and through talking about the past and projecting about the future, we gain some comfort and we look away from what's important. We have to look at the present moment before we can even begin to imagine the future. We have to be brave and stand up and take responsibility for our neighbours. This is a small island, and your address impacts too much on your opportunities. Having spent the last few weeks in Limerick and and the last year in St. Michael's Estate, I can tell you that unless we stand up and take action, unless we protect the services that changed our city over the last 20 years, history is most definitely going to repeat itself. And it is us, the people in this room, who will write it as much of it as anyone else. I'm going to finish with a quote by Brendan Ryan, who was the chairperson of St. Michael's Estate Task Force in 1998, the same year that I found the needle in my garden. This is a quote that we're going to use in history, and it sums up what gets me out of bed in the morning at the moment, so I thought after all that, I'll give you this. Yes! Brilliant! Among what we call opinion formers, that there are no heroes in the world anymore. We are told, limited and limited. There is no one with a vision, no one with courage, no one with commitment or a heart that never gives in. As far as the powerful, the significant and the influential go, all of that is probably true. Today's heroes live among the grassroots, in the spaces ignored by the great and the vocal. They struggle with ignorance and being ignored. They refuse to go into the boxes to which state and media consign them, and they never give in. St. Michael's Estate is full of such heroes and heroines, people who are indestructible and still full of hope, people who tolerate a lot, suffer too much, but were never defeated, either by the state or by those who the state allowed to come among them. This is their story, told by themselves. It's a story of our pride and their pride and our shame, a story of hope and sometimes passing moments of despair. This is the bit that gets me out of everyone. Above all, though, it is a story of life, and of a hope which comes not from promises or platitudes, but from a determination that things have to be made better.